you're suddenly thrown into the CEO seat.
Yeah.
What did what did that feel like?
A wave of emotions, the I would say start like there's something exhilarating about hitting a goal. You became CEO. You close this business and the search fund, which is a big hurdle. So there's a sense of relief, sense of a sense of relief, but exhilarating at the same time. But then there's the reality. It's like, oh, I'm a first time CEO, and I'm brought in to change the trajectory of this business to better support my customers, but also to support my investors. And so it immediately that sense of relief is short lived, and then it's a very like, okay, where do I get started?
Welcome to Reframe Fix, hosted by Jake Smith, brought to you by Workbench. Real conversations about leadership, the stories behind the scenes, and what it takes to go from stuck to scaling.
Jay Steele, welcome to Reframe Fix.
Thanks for having me, Jake. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So you and I know each other fairly well. And we'll get into that more as we have the conversation today. But we start out the podcast with the same question every time, which is what is a leader? So to Jay Steele, what is a leader? What does a good leader look like?
Yeah, I watch your podcast, so I know this question's going to be. I was like doing research, like what should I say? What does Claude say? And then I was like,
Did you ask Claude?
Yeah, of course. Ask Claude everything. and when I came back to was just like spent like 20 minutes just thinking like, what does it mean to me? And I look at it into kind of three core categories. I think there's a vision, inspirational. So there's like an entrepreneurial aspect. Two is trust. And I used like the 4 pillars of trust to define what trust is. And then the third, I think there is some fun, optimistic energy that needs to be a part of it. So I define a leader that has all 3 of those categories.
So inspiration being 1, trust second, fun third. That's Jay Steele's magic formula to leadership.
Yeah, I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. Well, and that's reflective of where you are today. And if I'm still doing this podcast in 10 years and you come back on, or even 5 years and we come back on, my gut is that, well, it could go either way. It could still be the same. Like, Hey, you stick true to those 3 things, or it could shift as you learn and as you continue to grow. So 2 things for the sake of our audience. One, hey, you referenced trust and the 4 pillars of trust, and that goes back to Charles Feltman's book, The Thin Book of Trust, and which is a resource that you and I both like. And then also for the benefit of our listeners, would love for you just to give a really brief arc of your career and where you are today.
Sure. So start background engineering in undergrad. Week before I graduated, joined the Navy and was an officer in the Navy for 6-7 years, where I worked at an organization called Naval Reactors, provides technical oversight over the nuclear Navy, which is submarines and aircraft carriers, basically. So a huge engineering focused role was my first stop in my professional career. Transitioned to business school before going to Amazon for a few years. And those experiences all kind of culminated into an entrepreneurial opportunity in the form of a search fund, where I partnered with some great investors, some veteran investors, veteran military investors, and they supported me through my search, where I found a company called Focus Learning, and within a month in my search, and was CEO 7-8 months later.
Yeah,
I've been doing it now for 2.5 years, a little over 2.5 years.
Yeah. So for you're in your first CEO role at the company that you became a CEO for the first time. What did it feel like when you stepped into that role? So, hey, part of backed by a fund, you've got investors, you go through the search process, you find this company that you want to acquire, and hey, day of close, you are suddenly thrown into the CEO seat.
Yeah.
What did what did that feel like?
Yeah, a wave of emotions.
Hmm.
The I would say start like there's something exhilarating about hitting a goal. You became CEO. You close this business in the search fund, which is a big hurdle. So there's a sense of
Sure.
relief, sense of a sense of relief, but exhilarating at the same time. But then there's the reality. It's like, oh, I'm a first time CEO, and I'm
Yeah.
brought in to change the trajectory of this business to better support my customers, but also to support my investors, and so
Yeah.
it immediately that sense of relief is short lived, and then it's a very like, okay, where do I get started?
What immediately stood out to you as being different about being a CEO than the other roles that you'd had before?
I think it's the it all ends it with you. You are the ultimate. When we're coming in, like, you ultimately are responsible. Whereas when you
Buck
work at
stops with
Amazon,
you.
exactly. When you're in Amazon, they're a couple layers above me but
Yeah.
here it's me. And so I say that a little bit, though, but I rely on my people and provide and put the ownership on them. But it ultimately is my responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. When you go home at the end of the day, or at the end of the day, the full responsibility of the company still sits on your shoulders. It's not like you're punching a time clock.
Yeah, for sure. And that weight takes time getting used to.
Yeah. So 2.5 years, that can, I don't want to, well, I was going to say, I don't want to make any assumptions. So, okay, Jake, don't make any assumptions and ask a question instead. So what have the 2.5 years in the CEO seat been like for you?
I mean, it's just been a really fun, challenging uh, experience that I've really enjoyed, to be honest. It's been, and uh, not without challenges, but we've been pretty successful thus far in our growth trajectory. And so just, trying to, keep the foot on the pedal. But at the
Yeah.
same time, have the brevity in the moment to appreciate all that we've accomplished, and, thankful for the team that I either inherited or have built. And so, trying to just take it day by day.
What what have you learned about being a leader, being in the CEO seat?
Yeah, I mean, so much. Uh, you know, and you take the experiences, and you bring your, I call it baggage. You bring your baggage with you, whether it's where you don't think you had a good leader in certain roles, and whichever organization that may be. You bring the good stuff, but then you also are taking on the experiences as you face them. And so, I say that like I brought that to the table, that I wanted to be an empathetic leader. I'm going to put my people first, and I genuinely care for them,
Yeah.
and I will put my people first. And so, like, I brought that to the table, and I don't think that's changed. But over time, I think I've learned this, to be better about what putting people first means, and in the sense that, setting clear expectations, holding
Mhm.
people accountable is still putting people first, because clear is kind. And if people have clear understanding of what they're doing, and you've clearly communicated what you're doing, like,
Mhm.
that is putting your people first. So that's one of the big learnings that I've had. Not just caring for people, it can also be firm.
Yeah, I don't like the phrase tough love. Um,
Mm,
yeah, and even as I say that, I'm like, no, I don't think it's tough love. Like, it's just, you mentioned that you'd listen to some of the podcasts that we've released so far, and in a conversation with Tony Julianell, and I think you listened to that episode, but he talks about, how do you actually care for people? How do you love people? And, if you care for somebody, but they're not thriving in their role, and for whatever reason, and so to contextualize it around what you just shared, if they're not thriving because, hey, there's not clarity around your expectations, and so they're kind of bouncing around like, I have no idea what Jay wants me to do. Like, hey, that's keeping them from thriving.
Right.
Like, hey, if you're not communicating clearly, it's like, I don't understand what Jay is saying. Hey, it's keeping them from thriving. What you kind of chuckled when I asked you what you've learned over the last 2.5 years. And you said that your stance or your posture as an empathic leader hasn't changed, and that, hey, you're people first. That what are aspects of your leadership that have changed? So what have you learned from being in the CEO seat that shifted or changed how you show up as a leader?
Yeah. So I come from an engineering organization in the Navy where like there's a right answer. Like 100% of the time there is a right answer. And like not everything is a math problem. And so,
Yeah.
learned very like pretty early on in this seat that, it's not always about making the right decision. It's about making confident decisions with support quickly and understanding when there are one-way doors and two-way doors, to use that metaphor. And on two-way doors, you blow through them. On one-way doors, you assess the situation and you go through it. And then if it's wrong, you find another door. And so, that was something that I lacked confidence in. I wanted the right answer and held my team accountable to what is the right answer. And that's not reality as a leader.
Yeah. Well, you just made your reference to one-way and two-way doors is a reference to Jeff Bezos. That's his.
It's been a long time since I read the Everything Source. I didn't remember that it was
yeah. Yeah, there are those things that just resonate as true, and part of our knowing each other is we work together professionally. And so you and I have had conversations about one-way doors and two-way doors as well. And so to add context to our listeners, one-way doors are decisions that when you make them, you just can't turn back. Like, they're either so significant in terms of cost or whatever it may be. Like, hey, the Artemis mission, we're recording while the Artemis mission is taking place. And like, hey, launching Artemis is a one-way door. Yeah. But not everything is. So the overwhelming majority of decisions are not one-way doors. They're two-way doors. And hey, when you make the decision and move through it, is like, hey, and you bring up something that you and I've talked about significant or over time as well, which is to not use language about a decision being right or wrong. But is the decision in alignment with where you want to go? Is there congruence with your values? Or does it move you further out of alignment with the things that are important to you? If that's your goals, if that's your values, etc. And it was interesting. I love tennis. And this morning I was actually listening to a podcast that I follow on tennis, and there's a new president of the USTA, the U.S. Tennis Association, and he was talking about, it's a great quote, and I think I'd love to do a LinkedIn post on it, but he said, I'd rather make a wrong decision than make no decision at all.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that nail on the head, right?
Yeah. What resonates with you about that?
Yeah, I mean, indecision is not a decision. Like, don't ever let indecision. I know that's just another mnemonic, but don't ever let indecision be your decision. So, like,
Yeah.
take control of it. And so, I think it just, there are times where we're all going to be wrong, but wrong is not because I'm paralyzed by the moment, and that's something that I in various ways communicate across the team, that you know we have a set of facts available to us at a time, and we will make the right decision and understand why we made those decisions. And if you're wrong, then we'll learn from that. But the only real wrong answer is to not make a decision.
I'm going to chastise you for
That was a little philosophical. Yeah.
well, I'm going to chastise you for using language of right decision and wrong decision. It's
Oh, yeah. I'm
I
sorry.
no, the reason I'm both joking and I'm not joking. And like almost everybody that I talk with or work with frames decisions as right decisions or wrong decisions, but to come back to it and to double click on it is like when you do it that way, you attach judgment to it. And so then there's like, oh, I don't want to do the wrong thing. And if you frame it instead as, oh, is this going to move us into greater alignment with our goals for the year? Is this going to move us into greater alignment with what we're trying to achieve? Is this going to move us into greater alignment with our values? Is this going to move us into greater alignment with, hey, our long-term plan, our 5-year plan, our 10-year plan? And if so, great. But, or if you think that it's not going to align you to those things, what are other options? But the reality is that you don't know until you actually make the decision.
Right.
And so even on the front end, you don't know if it's going to bring you into greater alignment or lesser alignment, or to go back to using right or wrong. You don't know. And so, but in my experience, if you attach judgment to it, if you call it right or wrong, then it increases, it slows down the decision making. Where like, I got to get this, or depending on your mindset or your frame of mind is, I got to get this right. Like, no, you don't have to get it right. Like back to the quote of like, I'd rather make a wrong decision than no decision at all. Yeah. What am I wanting to? What's a hard decision you've
Appropriately reframed? See, still growing on my leadership path.
appropriate? Well, hey, as I always say, like I offer it as detached. If it resonates and you want to pick it up, great. And if it doesn't, reject it. But what's a hard decision you've had to make as CEO?
Yeah.
And something that feels okay to talk about.
Yeah. Let's see. Hard decision. The right time to move on from the founder of this company.
Yeah.
Again, started with like empathetic. This person not only built it, but has been operating it for 40 plus years. But the reality of is, want to care for him as a person who built this, want to care for him as, this being his work and his lifelong journey, but also like have to build the culture with that I want. And can you do that with the founder around, at being kind of like the number two? And so that's that win question is a hard one that we had to wrestle.
How long did you wrestle with the question, and what finally got you to a decision?
Yeah, I think there are a couple different aspects of it. One is just like me feeling comfortable in the seat. He had obviously been running the company for a long time, and it's nice to have a safety net where the business will continue to run. It's nice to have someone to go and talk to learn and just get different perspectives. So so that's certainly one part of it. The other part, is the information that he is at in complete alignment with what I'm trying to do. And I think like that's the tension is, learning and getting all the good, but having a different vision to get it to something much better than where it was. It requires an a veering or a changing of directions that uh, this owner being a part of wasn't necessarily uh, ideal for. Thus, thus that toying with it, for a few months until like ready to kind of rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah, well, and it's a great example of what we were just talking about in terms of one-way or two-way door decisions. Um, that's a great example of a one-way door. Like,
Yeah,
hey, you acquired this company from the founder. It was 40 years old. He'd been there the whole time leading the company, and then making the decision to, like, okay, the image that comes to mind is kind of training wheels. Is like, okay, like, I got this.
yeah,
And I have a different vision for this going forward. And so we're going to break off and do it on our own now.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think I tried to make the door as much feel like a two-way door, even though it was a one-way. If you get what I'm saying, you
Yeah.
know, did it in such a way where my phone, I was always available. It was always ready to receive his call, but at
Mm.
the same time, it was no longer his company; it's mine, and the decisions I'll be made comes from me, not us. And so, like, I can continue to receive his input, but in a way that then I will continuously be delivered from me rather than him.
Yeah. I've never had that experience on a personal level, but I've heard from a lot of people who have acquired a business from a founder, and what seems to be a common thread in any of those cases is that the relationship with the founder is complicated. Yeah.
It can be. Luckily, again, I have an extremely fortunate career, and that's just another area of extreme fortune is that I continue to have a great relationship with him and talk to him at least once a month or quarter just to check in and make sure he's doing okay, and he does the same on us. So
Huh.
I've been very fortunate.
And that continues to today.
Yeah, talked to him yesterday.
Wow. And so what did it feel like when you made that decision though?
Kind of just like taking over the business, right? There's a sense of, okay, relief. This is mine. I'm ready for this moment, but also I don't have that safety net anymore. Anymore, like I don't.
Yeah.
If I don't know how to answer that question, that's on me. And so, at first, it was a couple weeks. It was, what would Gary do, or what would the founder do, and then it just became natural.
Yeah. Yeah. What to give the listener some context for what does focused learning look like today compared to when you acquired it, with whatever you're able to share, like.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're uh, around like a 10 to 14 person software company. And now we're north of 50 people in
Mm,
2.5 years and, grew revenue, we scale
so
revenue similarly.
yeah, so you're looking at, like, I mean, I'm just doing the math in my head, but you're looking at like 2.5, 3x growth over 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. How have you done that?
There's a lot of different facets to that. I think like, I think all most leaders would say, like, you can't do it by yourself. You need a team that you can empower and own. And the CEO's job is not necessarily to do all the work. It's to find the right people in the right seats to do the work and putting trust and ownership in them to continue to drive the business. And I've been very fortunate to have found the right people in various different roles. Not always perfect, but it continued to help the train move.
If I went to a random person in your company,
Yeah,
um, what how do you think they would describe you? How do they experience you?
such
You've talked
a
about wanting to value inspiration, trust, and fun. But if I ask them just, hey, so and so. How do you experience Jay as your CEO of Focus Learning?
Yeah, great question. And I think uh, I try, and so it'd probably be a good question for someone on my team. But I try in every conversation to show that there's life outside of work, and and so I think that that's how I try to at least display the empathy. Like, how's your family doing? And, you got any plans for the weekend? Stuff to just, life is not only about work. And so I like to think that I've built at least the caring aspect of trust with everybody. The fun, I try to display that through our operating system and our all hands meetings, with whether it's like fun call outs, etc. So my hope would be that you know a competent, but also brings brevity to work, and in an environment where it's hard if you don't have your team right there with you. Those daily interactions are tough, so you have to be really kind of tactical and surgical about ensuring that there's this positive presence around.
What how have you changed? How have you changed being a CEO?
I would start by saying, know, the first time you're a CEO, you kind of don't know what you don't know. So
Yeah.
you come at it with, yeah, I came at it rather than hubris and overconfidence, just relied on mentors. And like, as I've progressed, um, I think that there's still that leaning on mentors, but there's also, kind of grew the confidence through experience. But at the same time, I think, like, as we continue to scale, there's new challenges around any corner to learn and grow. And so I'm trying to, like, bring that to life with an example. But facing new challenges, and kind of learn something new every day. And I don't have like one tangible example that's jumping out at me. Maybe you can bring it to life.
Yeah. Well, so to add some context to this, one of the ways we interact professionally is in a coaching context, and um, so hey, I'll say this, and we can edit it out
Yeah.
on the other side if you don't want to talk about this. But one of the things I've observed in you, where you've significantly changed as a leader in being CEO, is what we've called having hard conversations.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that one's, that's something that, cognizant of every day. And have the Jake voice in the back of my head, like, what am I avoiding, or what space am I not holding for a more difficult conversation? And so that's something I would say, still a growth area, but I have improved, but I still, have opportunity for additional growth on that.
What have you learned from entering into or having hard conversations?
I think it goes back to something we talked about earlier, is about clear is kind. If you set clear expectations, the
Yeah.
hard conversations are not as hard, because the expectations were clear. And so it's actually, the conversations are hard because of something that I probably should have done better before in terms of communicating. And so I think that's the biggest awareness, is really taking the opportunity to set very clear expectations and ensure and ask that there's alignment across those expectations.
The Reframe Fix is a podcast from Workbench. When growth creates pressure, Workbench helps CEOs and leadership teams cut through complexity, align their people, and scale with confidence, bringing clarity through executive coaching and strategic planning. Learn more at workbench. Welcome to
Like, from where you started, I'm trying to frame this. Like, is the level of difficulty for you today, let's say that the level of difficulty was like, oh, there's 75, 80% level of uncomfortableness around this, and whether or not that's the starting part. Where do you feel like you are today in terms of what's the level of discomfort that's associated with hard conversations?
I mean, roughly, like I'd say I would have gotten 50% better. So I'd say I'm somewhere in the 30 to 45 range. If you
Yeah.
said 70, yeah, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah. Yeah. And what have you, so you're representing one side of the conversation, but when you have when you've had or entered into hard conversations, what have you noticed in terms of how people respond?
That can range the gamut.
Ah,
And depending on the hard conversation. And
mm,
again, and I think again that's directly tied to either expectations set or not appropriately set. And
mm,
as the CEO, when there is a tough conversation, especially when it comes to people, it's something that I like being a part of, um,
mm,
because I want people to know that I care, whether it's good or bad. Uh,
mm,
like I want to be a part of it. So you can tell, based on those hard conversations, that when they are hard conversations, you can tell that it's not it's usually that there's a misalignment in understanding, not and that
mm,
the emotion, like I very rarely in, at least in focus learning, ever focused or ever you know, ran up against like malintent or people
mm.
trying. It's the hard conversation is a real misunderstanding that is causing an emotional reaction, which then you understand why it's a hard conversation, and it just further emphasizes the need to clearly communicate and document things.
Yeah. What comes to mind is like what I want to say is that a lot of times when you have a hard conversation is you're naming something that is real. You're naming something that's happening. And in a lot of cases, I wonder if like, oh, like, hey, we finally have named the 900-pound elephant in the room. Like we're all in this room and we're like moving around because this elephant is taking up so much space, but nobody's talking about it. But by entering into the hard conversation, hey, we're now talking about it. And it's like, okay, we're talking about it now.
Yeah.
Um, and you know this because a framework that you and I use around these types of conversations is the leadership framework and the two dynamics of authority and vulnerability. Authority is exercising decision making power on behalf of an organization. Vulnerability is entering into the uncertainty of of people conversations or into the uncertainty of organizational decisions. It's whatever uncertainty exists within the company. And having hard conversations is so hard because it requires you to embrace that vulnerability. It requires you to embrace uncertainty. It's like you don't know, you said like, oh, the responses run the gamut. It's like, yes, that's the uncertainty of it is you don't know what the response is going to be. But should that keep you from having the hard conversation?
N- no, and I think that framework is perfect, and I love using it. And it that the way you explain that to me, what's coming up is that when you flex into, so my default being vulnerable
Right.
and going into conversations like, hey, I'm comfortable, hey, you tell me, help me understand, like I'm okay with the discomfort. But when there's a tough conversation, it's likely because I did not flex into my authoritative state earlier. And every time I have a tough conversation, it's I need to set clearer expectations and sometimes use that authoritative state and then let them own it and be vulnerable. And I think, that it just, in a loose example, that's what it really brings that model to life for me, and something I think about every day.
Yeah. So to add some more context to that framework of the diagram, so we have the dynamics of authority and vulnerability. And what we like to say is that everybody has a default. And you just shared that your default is vulnerability. That's my default in leadership as well. And when you're whatever your default is, your non-default dynamic. So your non-default dynamic is authority, in that typically one that feels uncomfortable, and typically that's a growth area, or what I call a growth edge that will typically exist over your life. But what so authority is exercising decision making power on behalf of the organization. What's uncomfortable about authority for you?
Yeah, it's the, telling people I'll use an example, like, I'm not a marketing person, never had experience marketing. So
Yeah.
telling someone who has a marketing background what they should do is like, well, they probably know more than me, and I also hired them to do that job. They should be telling me what they should be doing, but they in their role don't always see the bigger picture, right? And I have the bigger picture, and there are times where it does make sense for me to use authority to set guidelines, and to give direction, and then give the latitude to then find with that direction to ensure that they're making decisions that are aligned with that guideline.
Yeah. I'm curious, how did you we talked a tiny little bit that you have background, you have experience in the Navy. How did you experience authority in the military?
Yes.
Yes, you experienced it.
Yes, it was experienced. Yeah, it was never. I didn't have the model then, of course.
Yeah.
But authority came in different ways. There are some where there are what I would consider great leaders that use authority in the right way, that define a path and then allow ownership. And then there's the yelling and swearing at you, authoritative, like I wouldn't even call him a leader, manager that tells you exactly what to do. And like, you experience both in the Navy. Or I experienced both in the Navy.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to that that the frameworking and part of me like wants to pull it up, but I'm realizing like that'll only help if people are watching this on video, not talking about it.
Yeah.
But because there's two dynamics, again, the dynamics being authority and vulnerability, we can plot it on a 2x2 graph. And we talk about if your default is authority in the leadership framework, if your default is authority, you and I have shared that our defaults are both, well, let's start there. You and I both share a default to vulnerability. The risk when you default to vulnerability is being in a state of drift.
Right.
And so you can imagine it's kind of missing that authority. It's missing the decision making. But the opposite side of that, so if your default is authority, the state that we talk about being, then if you over embrace authority, is being destructive. In that actually it's learning how to embrace both authority and vulnerability appropriately and contextually in any given situation. And it's never 50-50. Some situations do call for a lot of authority, like absolutely. And authority can have a negative connotation, but we look at it, the way that we define it in terms of exercising decision-making power, we view it positively. But if you embrace both appropriately and contextually, never 50-50, that people experience you as being in a state of thriving or as a thriving leader. And then if you don't embrace either, so if you don't embrace authority, if you don't embrace vulnerability, we talk about being in a state of decay. And those are strong words. And that's me talking a lot. And what I'm curious is, in the military, highly authoritative, did you experience that as destructive?
Mostly. Mostly. I mean, destructive, and you're right, like you mentioned, it's a strong word. We got our jobs done, but it's not necessarily leadership, right? It is managing and or micromanaging authoritatively. It is not where people are super excited to go to work every day and feel empowered to do their jobs. It is, the word, like you said, the words are strong, but destructive doesn't mean we weren't successful. It just didn't lead to what I would and you have other frameworks for it, but like a healthy organization when it comes to leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Um,
Yeah.
what What do you like about leadership?
It's many different forms, and like both internally, like
Hmm.
how leading one person can be different to leading the next. So like, how do I change how I lead based on who the person is or what role they have? Like, I
Yeah.
love, I love the variability from that perspective, but I also love that, like, you know, as you've talked to in these, in your podcast, everyone has a different definition. But
Yeah.
I think holistically, there's something about knowing where you're going and caring, and so I think like the many shapes that it can take, I think is something that's really engaging and exciting, and that you know I may be a good leader for focused learning, but my leadership style may not be perfect for another company. And so the way that
Yeah.
it's amorphous and kind of specific is just a very engaging thing, and why I spend so much time talking to you and learning about it.
What has surprised you most about being CEO?
I think what immediately comes to the surface is like how much
Yeah.
fun it's been.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So
like, I mean,
say more about fun.
yeah, I mean, you know, I I a lot of people wake up every day and dread going to work, and and I've
Yeah.
and I've and I've been there. We talked about my time in various different aspects and different roles. Um,
Yeah.
I never wake up and feel that way. I'm
Mm.
excited to take on the next set of problems. I find that I could be, knee deep in talking software nuances, and then jump to, hey, how are we going to do this financial model, to, hey, what are we looking at M&A, and just the dynamic nature, how many different things I could be touching. It's engaging, it's fun, it keeps me on my toes. Just I really enjoy I just really enjoyed that aspect of it. So I just find it fun. And is it hard? Of course. Are there times where I can't sleep at night because I'm thinking, did I say that the right way? Of course.
What um what's the relationship between fun and meaningful for you? Is something fun because it's meaningful, or is something meaningful because it's fun?
I think something is meaningful. Yeah, it's fun because it's meaningful. But those are they are not mutually exclusive, right?
Yeah.
Things can be fun but not meaningful. This is both meaningful and fun, and they're not synonyms in this case. And or they cannot be used interchangeably in this scenario. It is fun and it is meaningful. Um, it is meaningful, but it is not everything. There is a life beyond this, and I do not work. I do not work. I don't live to work. I work to live, and I try to pass that on to my employees. That a lot of us are going home to, at least in my team, a lot of us are going home to young kids, and are getting woken up in the middle of the night because they have babies at home. Like, having that perspective and that empathy, but still waking up in like and excited to go, I think just like speaks volumes, at least for me, and I hope that my team feels that too.
Yeah, what's coming up for me, I'd love to get your perspective on this, or to get your thoughts on this. It's something that I just learned, and so it's new to me, which is people like being part of something great. And as they dug further in the research around that, like, well, why is that the case? Like, and it doesn't have to be the greatest, but that people like being part of something great. And as they dug further, like, two things emerged: is that one is collaboration is directly tied to a reward center in our brain, and then shared success. So not individual success, but shared success is also directly tied to a reward center in our brain, and that those two reward centers connect to, so the reward centers of collaboration and shared success tied to being part of something great, and that people experience something very positive when that happens. Like, what what comes up for you when you hear that?
What comes up is, and part of our operating system, we call it the WOS, the Focused Learning Operating System. What comes up is, we end our all hands, our monthly all hands meeting with all our employees and all our contractors with, 15 minutes of both team shout outs and individual shout outs to acknowledge where people are working both cross functionally, cross department, but also where departments are kicking butt, to kind of build that collaborative sense of success, and also, highlight the major successes that we as a company have been blessed with. And so what immediately comes up is like, it's good to hear that. It's something that my leadership team are very are intent on keeping and having part of it. And then the other thing that comes up is like, man, that'd be easier if we were all in a room together and or in an office together, where we could go like give people high fives and when great things happen, or ring the bell when we close a sales deal. And
Yeah.
it's like how intentional you have to be about bringing that in a remote software environment with people in various different time zones, and something that I continue to struggle with it, in the sense that, am I doing enough to lean in on that?
Yeah. The other thing that comes up for me is, as I'm thinking about this, is you talked about learning that you can do hard things. And so often, when working with clients, I'll hear like, this is so hard.
Hmm.
And then I always ask them the same thing, which is, would you want it to be easy?
Hmm.
And every time I get the same response, which
So they
is
say,
no.
you don't learn
No.
anything. It's just easy.
Yeah, well, there's no, like, if it's easy, then there's no sense of accomplishment.
Right.
Or also is like, it's so hard, but then like when it's like, if you like to hike or if you're into mountaineering, and you start the day and you have like, hey, we're going to go summit that peak. And like when you get there, why does it feel good? Like, oh, we just did this, we accomplished something, maybe it was even difficult to do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It
you know,
just hits like obstacles, like, there are different ways of saying this, but one of our values is obstacles is opportunities. And sometimes, and to your point, like, people can, me included, like, we all get lost sometimes when things are so challenging, to not step away and see the opportunity of
yeah,
what this change is, what you can learn from it, how good it will feel once you accomplish that goal. And trying to reframe that for people who are just trying to get their job done, and like, in showing them the bigger picture, it helps.
yeah, yeah. Maybe somebody will surprise me one day when somebody says it's really hard, and then I ask them, "Would you want it to be easy?" And maybe someone will say yes.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I just find that really interesting, though. Like, there's something about being able to do hard things, and when you do hard things, there's a sense of accomplishment, and the sense of accomplishment, to come back to kind of where we started, but it's fun. It's like, oh my gosh, like that was so hard, but God, that was fun. Like,
Yeah.
what was it about that like, why do you think that doing hard things, there's a relationship between doing hard things and it being fun?
The experience, the lessons learned,
Yeah.
the sense of accomplishment. I think we hit on most of those, but I think that that's kind of the summary in my perspective.
Yeah. I have a good friend, and I really like how this friend frames, um the framing is, how to how to create experiences. And the importance of an experience is that it then creates a memory. It's something to reflect back on. And what comes to mind in talking about doing hard things is like it's an experience. And it's like, oh, it's something to reflect back on. It's a memory. It's something that we shared together. And I'm curious how all that plays into it. Jay, what's you talked about, you went through the search process. There's a term that is often referred to, ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition. It's very, very popular right now. Hey, what one piece of advice would you want to offer to somebody who's thinking about ETA, that's in the search process, or somebody who's maybe a first time CEO, but they haven't been in the seat as long as you have yet? What would you want to offer them?
For the ETA side, don't get discouraged. There are a lot of business owners, but there are also a lot of searchers right now. And, not every, business is a right fit for you. And so just, stay true to yourself and find what feels right for you. From a first time CEO perspective, I think it's, stay confident. Leverage mentors. You're not the only person that's gone through most of the challenges you're facing. There are people out there that have experienced it. And if you don't have a mentor, get a great coach.
Yeah. Great. Jay, thanks for being on Reframe Fix today. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way for people to do that?
I think if you just find me on LinkedIn, named Jay Steele would be the best.
Great. Again, Jay, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks, Jake.